I'm Aruna Papp. I'm with you again with another segment that has been inspired by people who have been emailing us and asking us questions about various services that are provided to immigrants and the community at large. हमारी कम्युनिटी को बहुत सी सर्विसेज का पता नहीं है जो उनको ज़रूरत होती है, लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसा भी होता है कि कोई सर्विसेज जैसे पुलिस वगैरह है या चिल्ड्रंस एड है, आपको उनका बिल्कुल पता नहीं होता जब तक वो आपके घर आ जाए, तब पता चलता है कि चिल्ड्रंस एड क्या होती है। आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत स्पेशल गेस्ट है। वी हैव अ वेरी स्पेशल पर्सन हु इज़ गोइंग टू टॉक टू अस अबाउट चिल्ड्रंस एड सोसाइटी. What do they do? How do they get involved in your home? And what are the benefits? What do we need to know about them? What their job is, and so on. It is important for us to know about Children's Aid. हमें मालूम होना चाहिए कि Children's Aid जो सर्विस है वो क्या है और उनका काम क्या है। कभी कभी हम लोग अपने बच्चों को ज़्यादा डिसिप्लिन करते हैं, मारते हैं, पीटते हैं। कनाडा में ये सब चीज़ जो है कानून के ख़िलाफ़ है। सो आज हमारे साथ एक गेस्ट हैं जिनका नाम है अनुषा, और वो हमें बताएंगी कि चिल्ड्रंस एड जो है वो क्या करती है, उनका क्या काम है और उनकी सहूलियत क्या है। अनुषा, welcome to my show, and thank you for coming. And one of the reasons I wanted you to come and talk to us is we have received a lot of emails and phone calls from viewers saying we need to explain to our community that beating your children, disciplining your children, and many other ways that we discipline our children are against the law. Right. And Children's Aid will get involved, and then it becomes a very traumatic event for the family. Right. So first, tell me a little bit about your job. What do you do? Who are you? And how did you get involved in it? And what does Children's Aid stand for?
Okay, hi. Thank you, Aruna, for having me on the show. So with Children's Aid, I actually, when I graduated, I started working with them in 2002. And Children's Aid is a child protection agency. So our work primarily is focusing on children's safety and well-being. That is our job. So in this scenario, the child is our client. So Children's Aid is basically making sure that the children are safe, firstly, families are supported, and communities are also built stronger with the help and service of Children's Aid.
Anusha, बच्चे जो हैं अपनी फैमिली के अंदर ही तो सेफ होते हैं, तो फिर चिल्ड्रंस एड का क्या मतलब है कि वो फैमिली में जाके इंटरफियर करें? क्यों करते हैं?
ये सवाल काफ़ी लोग पूछते हैं हमें, शुरू से पूछते आए हैं, क्योंकि आइडिया आपका बिल्कुल सही है कि बच्चे अपनी फैमिलीज़ में सेफ होते हैं, क्योंकि जनरली यही सोच है कि आपके माँ बाप से ज़्यादा आपका कोई ख्याल नहीं रख सकता। लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली ये सही नहीं है। हमेशा सम केसेस में जो आपके फैमिली में केयर गिवर्स है उनसे भी आपको नुकसान पहुंच सकता है।
ये नुकसान कैसा होता है?
बहुत टाइप का होता है, डिफरेंट टाइप्स का। फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट होता है चाइल्ड अब्यूज़, मतलब अपने बच्चों को मारना, पीटना और उनको नुकसान पहुंचाना।
अच्छा, आपने कहा चाइल्ड अब्यूज़। चाइल्ड अब्यूज़ इज़ अ वेरी बिग वर्ड।
जी।
तो जब आप कहती हैं ना चाइल्ड अब्यूज़, तो मेरे को ध्यान में ऐसा था किसी ने उसको छुरी मारी, डंडे से मारा है ना, खून निकाल दिया। क्या होता है ये चाइल्ड अब्यूज़?
नहीं, वो इतनी फार फेच सिनेरियो भी नहीं, उससे काफ़ी कम
What is it? What are the definitions of child abuse?
Okay, so definition, I would say mainly if you're looking at defining it, you're looking at any kind of physical, emotional, mental or sexual harm towards children, which can be by their caregivers or people in a caregiving position.
So physical is hitting them.
That's right.
Pulling their hair.
Pushing, hitting, punching, kicking.
So if a mother will slap a daughter, that's abuse.
Well, it's not viewed as it's viewed as inappropriate discipline. We don't necessarily stretch it to the abuse bracket in the sense that we're not looking at charging this mother necessarily right away, but we're looking at offering her better ways maybe of disciplining. As you said in the beginning, that disciplining your children is important in every family, and every child needs that form of discipline. But what does that look like, and how much is necessary, and more importantly, how much is crossing the line and inappropriate? And that's what we struggle with, trying to explain our families, because they do feel it's a personal matter. It's my home, it's my way of living, and it's my way of disciplining my kids.
So when I got called by a school to come and talk to a mother and a daughter, what had happened is a mother had slapped her daughter, right? And she had fingerprints on her face.
Right.
And nobody saw the fingerprints, and this 13-year-old went to school,
right,
and her teacher saw the fingerprints,
right.
और इस माँ ने बिना सोचे समझे जोर से 13 साल की बेटी को थप्पड़ मार दिया, और उसके उंगलियों के निशान उसके मुंह पे रह गए। तो स्कूल से मुझे फ़ोन आया और उसकी माँ को स्कूल वालों ने चार्ज किया। सो ये हो सकता है?
ये भी हो सकता है, क्योंकि ये एक एक्सेसिव फॉर्म है डिसिप्लिन का, जो आप लाइन क्रॉस करके इनअप्रोप्रिएट सिवियर बन जाती है। तो अगर इतनी ज़ोर से मारा होगा कि चीक पे इम्प्रिंट रह गए उनकी उंगलियों के, तो फिर मतलब ये है कि yes, it's too much, and it does become a criminal offense, right? You can be charged, and we explain that to our parents. Many parents use belts, very old school form, of course, belt, wooden spoons,
बाल
खींचना, कमरे में लॉक कर देना काफ़ी घंटों के लिए, खिलाना पिलाना नहीं, so just confining them.
So if a parent says you are क्या कहते हैं उनका housebound, क्या कहते हैं, grounded, you're grounded, go upstairs and you're not getting supper tonight, is that child abuse?
It's a form of, unfortunately, you are withholding a necessity from a child. Food, water, sleep, shelter, these are all necessities. So refraining from refraining a child from having these bases is also a form of child abuse, of punishing them. That's not appropriate.
So आजकल अगर कोई माँ बाप कहें तुमने बदतमीजी की, तुम लेट आए, तुमने गाली दी, कुछ भी किया, आज तुम्हें खाना नहीं मिलेगा, जाओ जाके ऊपर सो जाओ, तो ये चाइल्ड अब्यूज है।
मतलब ये कह सकते हैं, लेकिन जाओ अपने कमरे में जाओ, and grounding them and not letting them watch TV, that's not child abuse. But withholding food from them can then become a problem where somebody can report it to the Children's Aid. Not necessarily that they're going to be charged, and of course not necessarily that the child is removed from them. But every situation is different. Of course, somebody would probably want to come in and speak to them. This child could very well go to school the next day and say, I haven't had dinner for 2-3 nights because my parents aren't giving me dinner. That then becomes a problem. There's a pattern of neglect, right? So,
or the other thing that is very confusing is emotional abuse. You know, growing up in India, people didn't care. My grandmother, my parents never said that, but my grandmothers or others said, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you're this, you're dirty, you're all बेवकूफ है, जो मन में आया कह दिया. So is that considered abuse now? What is psychological abuse? What is?
I think looking at emotional and psychological is always harder to pinpoint and to define in terms of risk of, because it's not a mark where your scenario about the child with the imprint on the cheek. You cannot see the effects of emotional abuse right away, and of course they're manifested inside. That's a problem. Things like being negative and condemning and verbally abusing your child are all examples of what can lead to emotional harm for this child as he or she grows, because again, you're learning from everyone at home, you're hearing your parents tell you really not very nice things and calling you bad names or telling you you're worthless or you're not good enough, which is very damaging for a child, or anyone for that matter, but especially for children because they're very impressionable when they're young. They're really vulnerable, and that makes them really internalize some of this negativity, which then comes out in different harmful ways when they grow up.
So अपने बच्चों को ये कहना कि तू बेवकूफ़ है, तू negative मैसेजेस देना ये गलत है, इमोशनल अब्यूज़ हो जाती। दूसरी बात यह है कि जब माँ बाप आपस में लड़ते हैं ज़ोर से और बच्चे सुन रहे हैं और एक दूसरे को गालियाँ दे रहे हैं या एक दूसरे रिश्तेदारों को गालियाँ दे रहे हैं, जो भी हो रहा है, ये भी emotional abuse है?
जी, ये emotional abuse है. And with Children's Aid, it was after 2004 that I think the realization came that emotional, well, earlier on, but the fact that we then developed a domestic violence team to deal with exactly these kind of situations where parents are arguing or there's any adult conflict, but usually partner conflict, we call it, in the home, and children are being exposed to it. Again, it doesn't mean that they need to be physically harmed. It doesn't mean that they need to be even in the room, but the fact that they're being exposed to these kind of ongoing conflicts does cause emotional harm to them as well. It distorts their image and vision and beliefs of what peaceful harmony, like a peaceful harmony home should look like, and it affects them because they're hearing a lot of this. And a lot of our parents will say to us कि बच्चे तो सो रहे थे, उनको नहीं पता, हम दूसरे कमरे में थे, उन्होंने कुछ देखा नहीं. And this is unfortunately not true. Many times parents feel that and want to make themselves believe that, but unfortunately the children are aware, and we hear about this from the kids themselves in their words through schools, who then call us, and they're either hiding or they're they're hearing everything and they're just confused, and it's
so
not
it
good.
is wrong to assume that we are in the basement fighting and the children don't know anything.
Exactly,
Yeah?
yes.
The children know everything, and it
Yes.
doesn't matter how old they are.
No,
Even little babies can feel the tension.
Very true.
Yeah.
Research actually from a lot of big pediatric doctors at sick kids, for example, has shown that children as young as infancy stage are affected by hearing loud noises. Of course, they're not understanding what's going on around them, but they can feel the tension. So the mother, father are fighting, yelling, breaking things. Maybe he's hit her, maybe she's hit him, and then she comes back to hold the child. The baby can feel the tension through feeding, through holding, through attempts of the mother to soothe the child, and it's really felt because I think they know that something around in their environment is not right.
Sometimes when parents are fighting, one parent will tell the children bad things about the other parent.
Yes.
And then the other parent will tell the child bad things about the other parent.
Yes.
And the children, they love both the parents and they get caught in it. Isn't that a horrible way of bringing your child up when you're saying that? How does that impact a child?
Very, very negatively, unfortunately. Both the parents feel, I think, in their own personal fighting and battle that they're trying to still show that they love their child, but the very fact that you are keeping the child in the middle, confusing him or her, giving them mixed messages about the other parents, you're just showing that we don't get along and now you have to choose sides. Or I'm a better parent and I can show you how by either buying them things or letting them stay up later or giving them an iPad when they're not supposed to be using it and doing homework, things like that. Unfortunately, parents make it very personal, and one tries to win over the other, and then the children, of course, get hurt. And they're not getting good guidance, good direction, and it's emotionally harmful for them.
And one of the things that is happening within our South Asian community, at least in Ontario and Vancouver and other places where we have a large community,
Yes.
is that teenagers especially are attempted suicide.
Right.
They are in conflict with being Indian and South Asians, being Canadian, wanting to be like their peers, but also the tension in the house
Right.
with their parents, and they have nobody to talk to
Yes.
because everybody's told them this is a family matter.
Yes.
Keep it secret, keep it secret,
Yeah.
keep it secret, don't tell anybody. So what they do is attempt to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So that, unfortunately, is also reality when children are growing up in the situations that we've mentioned, where they've seen a lot of anger, a lot of violence, or a lot of verbal abuse and things like that in the home. They grow up with, again, a distorted feeling and a distorted vision, rather, of what family should be like. And then maybe these are kids that don't have a good support system, don't have peers that they can count on, or extended family members. So they
They don't want to tell their secrets.
Exactly.
If they don't know anybody
And
else.
they feel like it has to be kept under wraps, like you said. So they go into depression. Some of them,
there's a lot of cutting.
Yes,
there's a
we
lot of
see a
cutting
too.
and
Self-harm.
Yes, self-harm. That's what the word is. And I've been called to come to the hospitals and talk to parents
Right.
where they found that the girls and now young boys are cutting themselves on the thighs. They don't want anybody to see.
Yeah.
Years ago, it used to be cutting the wrist,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's not cutting deep enough to kill,
No.
but just slicing
Yes,
their
yes.
and the thighs. And I was shocked
Yeah.
that it's not just girls doing it.
No, boys
It's
too.
also the
Yeah.
young boys are doing it, and
Yeah.
the reason is I don't know how to deal with the tension in my house.
Exactly.
And if I do I talk to mom? Do I talk to dad?
Who do I
Why
have?
don't they understand?
Yes, yes.
So-
And they're turned away, and that's why they're resorting to self-harm, including other ways like substance abuse and, like I said, depression. These are all ways of just kind of your body's way of, your mind's way of coping, rather, and a defense mechanism that I'm just going to hurt myself and that's going to make it better. It's almost like an addiction, which is bad, but it's coming from a place where they feel lonely and isolated and very...
And ashamed.
Yes, and ashamed of what their situation is and where they're coming from.
And I've heard moms say, I'm doing this for my children. The house is for the children. We're working 2 jobs for the children. Everything
Yes.
for the children. So when the
It's not.
children hear that, they feel very guilty.
Yeah, yeah.
That my dad's working 20 hours, my mom is working 2 jobs,
Yeah.
and they say this is for the children. So the children are trying to kill themselves.
Yeah.
So they will not be
Because they're not happy.
They're not happy.
And
But this is a big guilt.
It is, and I think they're just guilt-ridden by it.
Yeah.
The fact that they think everything is their fault, and partly because they're told, and sometimes
They can
direct
hear
and
it.
indirect ways,
Yeah.
that this is your fault, and this is because of you it's happening, and which is wrong, because what the parents are doing is venting out their frustration and anger and helplessness on the child, who is not responsible at the end of the day for the situation.
I've had young people say, I didn't ask you to buy a bigger car. I didn't
Exactly.
ask you to buy a bigger
big
house.
house.
You wanted it,
Yes.
and you're blaming it on me that this is for the
Exactly.
children. That's not what the children want.
No, no.
So when we talk to the parents, and I am the one who sees the mediation and talking to the
Right.
parents, a lot of the time the parents will say, everybody has conflict in the house. Everybody fights, where there are, in our language, जहाँ बर्तन होंगे वहाँ शोर तो होगा, whatever, बर्तन तो खड़कते हैं, ये है वो है. They don't seem to get it.
No.
How do you deal with that?
It's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge because, again, sometimes we deal with families and work with families. Most of them don't want children's aid at their door, and understandably so. The myth that we're associated with is going back years is that children's aid is here to take your kids away or to judge you as a parent or to put your parenting down. None of that is true. The reality is we're here to try to support you and get to a better place at the end for your child, because that's what we all want. And I think parents are very defensive. Parents are very closed to any kind of, any kind of indication that something's not right here. How can we fix it? And they don't quite want to believe that they're doing anything wrong, because at the end of the day, the children have a roof over their head, they have a bed to sleep in, they have school to go to, and that's probably a lot more than some of these families have come from themselves when they were younger. Some unfortunate circumstances. So they don't see anything wrong in all of what we're talking about, be it physical or emotional. They don't think that they're harming their children, and that part is always hard to bring forth in a very respectful way, I think.
And usually जब भी घर में गड़बड़ होती है, ज़्यादातर टीचर्स जो हैं वो देखते हैं कि बच्चा पढ़ नहीं रहा ठीक से, सो नहीं रहा, क्लास में सो रहा है, खाना नहीं खा रहा, डिप्रेस लग रहा है, तो फिर वो काउंसलर के पास भेजते हैं. तो वहाँ से पता चलता है कि घर में क्या हो रहा है, और फिर वहाँ से या तो आपको फ़ोन आता है या मेरे को आता है कि ये कुछ ठीक नहीं है, आइए ज़रा मीडिएशन करें, देखें क्या हो रहा है, काउंसलिंग. तो पेरेंट्स जो मेरे पास आते हैं वो कहते हैं कि यही सोचते हैं कि देखिए हर घर में लड़ाई होती है, तो हमारा क्या है, हम भी लेकिन उनकी ये समझ में नहीं आता कि हाँ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जो है, फ़र्क आइडियाज़ जो हैं, वे ऑफ थिंकिंग जो है होनी चाहिए, लेकिन उस क्या लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल करते हैं, किस टोन में हम एक दूसरे से बात करते हैं, ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है. तो बदतमीज़ी से बात करना या गाली से बात करना कि मैं थका हुआ था, मैं थकी हुई थी तो मेरे मुंह से ये निकल गया, तो बच्चे यही देखते हैं
और सुनते भी हैं.
तो वो कहते हैं ये नॉर्मल है, ये नॉर्मल है. तो लोग मेरे को अब कहते हैं कि अरुणा हमें सिखाती है कि लड़ाई कैसे करना है. मैं कि लड़ाई आप ज़रूर करो, लेकिन तमीज़ से करो, तमीज़ से करो. भाई तमीज़ से कैसे लड़ाई हो सकती है? हो सकती है, और कभी कभी तो ये होता है कि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो घर में, तो बच्चों को बिठा के भी दिखाओ कि भाई कैसे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो रहा है. दिस इज अ बिग इशू राइट नाउ. हाउ कैन आई ट्रस्ट माई पेरेंट्स? So the children will say in front of the parent,
Right.
of course I'm listening.
Yes.
Of course I love you.
Yeah.
But inside they don't.
They don't.
And then they feel the conflict
Yeah.
and they don't know how to handle it.
Right.
And then they cut themselves, they take overdose, they do this and that,
Right.
or drugs,
Yeah.
or drinking, and it's becoming a big problem.
It is. It is.
Now, the big question is, when and how do the children get taken away?
So in our work, we actually really pride ourselves in trying to keep the families together. Even in extreme, so to answer your question, in extreme situations where there is a pattern of severe abuse or neglect in the home, and this could be any of what we talked about, physical, sexual, psychological, withholding necessities, so any kind of neglect, that's a situation where we have to then assess and make an informed decision with our supervisor on whether we feel this child is going to be safe left in the home. We have a safety assessment scale, and we have a risk factor assessment that we do with all our families before coming to any kind of decisions. So if we are going to remove them from their home for the time being, we are always trying to place them with kin. It's called a kinship program. So kin could be anyone, an extended family member, a grandmother, aunt, uncle, and if no direct extended family, then it would be anyone else that the parents deem are necessary, are possible options. And we would of course do home studies and safety assessment type of situation there too, police checks before placing the child there. So it could be even a really good neighbor who's very connected with the child and who the child is comfortable with, things like that. So we do look at trying to place the child always with someone known and someone that they feel happy and comfortable with, if it's possible. If not, then it's foster families.
और हमने एक बात और नोटिस की है कि अगर बच्चों के साथ ये हो रहा है तो फैमिली में जो अंकल्स आंटी नेबर्स हैं उनको मालूम है कि ये हो रहा है.
Right.
तो मैं उन लोगों से यही कहना चाहती हूँ कि अगर आपको मालूम है कि इन बच्चों के साथ ऐसा हो रहा है और ये बच्चे ट्रबल्ड हैं और या इस फैमिली में बहुत ज़्यादा लड़ाई हो रही है और आपस में, और आप किसी को बताते नहीं हैं, किसी, if you don't tell anybody, if you don't ask for help, then you are also guilty.
Yes. Yeah.
Of protecting the abuse.
Yes, exactly.
Isn't that right?
That's right. So we also ask, a lot of our referrals come in from people in the community. This could be a teacher, a neighbor, a doctor, nurse, lawyer, anyone who suspects even that there's child abuse in the home. You don't have to be sure, and you don't have to have facts. You can always call us and even consult and say, I don't feel right about this family. I've seen something, I've heard something, and I'm not feeling comfortable, and I'd like to talk to somebody about it. And you can do that, because it is your duty as a citizen or anyone in the community to report even suspected child abuse or neglect.
And I think the reason you and I are talking about it is to make sure that people in our community know that Children's Aid is not there to take your children away, and they are very precious.
Yes.
And sometimes we as parents, especially new parents, need help. Need help.
The supports, and we understand and greatly respect that children are most likely to thrive well and do well and grow in an emotionally and physically healthy way in their own homes with their own parents. There is no doubt about that. Parents are generally and mostly in majority cases the ones who love their children the most.
They all do,
and they do. And unfortunately, there are some that maybe just don't know how to express that in a proper way. There are some that need supports because they don't have that, and there's some that are isolated them and disturbed themselves.
छोटे छोटे बच्चे होते हैं, 3 बच्चे होते हैं, छोटे 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 छोटे, उन तीनों को संभालना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता है.
Single parent
और फादर काम कर रहे हैं, वो मदर घर में अकेली हैं. तो चिल्ड्रंस एड जो है ना, वो उनकी मदद कर सकती है कि भाई उनकी बेबी सिटिंग अरेंज कर सकती है ताकि 3 घंटे के लिए 4 घंटे के लिए बच्चे किसी और के पास चले जाएं और उनकी मदर को थोड़ा रेस्ट मिल जाए, वो नहा धो ले कुछ आराम से. बहुत मुश्किल होता है छोटे छोटे बच्चों को पालना, तो इसमें भी हम मदद कर कर सकते हैं ना,
जी।
तो उन लोगों की कभी बच्चे घर में हो तो घर साफ करने को टाइम नहीं मिलता, लॉन्ड्री करने को टाइम नहीं मिलता, और करना तो चाहते हैं लेकिन 3 बच्चे टांगों में लिपटे में बहुत मुश्किल होता है। तो कहाँ जाएं, किससे पूछें, कहाँ, तो इसमें भी हम लोगों की मदद कर सकते हैं कि यहाँ आपको पैसे नहीं देने पड़ेंगे, यहाँ वाई है, यहाँ ये सर्विस है, आप थोड़ी देर के लिए अपने बच्चे वहाँ छोड़ दीजिए, आपको आराम मिल जाएगा, सो दैट कैन बी। सो कितनी ज़्यादा सर्विसेज हैं जो बच्चों के फैमिली की बेहतरी के लिए हैं। सो हमें डरना नहीं चाहिए।
नॉट एट ऑल, बिल्कुल नहीं डरना चाहिए। इनफैक्ट ऑप्शंस यहाँ, सर्विसेज और रिसोर्सेज की शॉर्टेज नहीं है लकीली यहाँ पे। और बस अगर फैमिली को डर लगे या उनको अनसर्टनिटी हो तो उनको पूछना चाहिए कि देखो मैं कुछ गलत नहीं कर रही, मैं अपने बस बच्चों को संभालना चाहती हूँ, मैं थोड़ा सपोर्ट चाहती हूँ, और आप कैसे हेल्प कर सकते हैं सिचुएशन में। और हम बड़े केसेस ऐसे क्लोज कर लेते हैं जहाँ
और अपना नाम बताने की जरूरत भी नहीं है।
जी,
नाम अगर आप फोन करें तो नाम बताने की भी जरूरत नहीं है।
हम आपको सर्विसेज फोन पे भी ऑफर कर सकते हैं कि आपके कम्युनिटी में जहां आप रहते हैं और उसके आसपास क्या है, एंड हम आपकी हेल्प कैसे कर सकते हैं, हम आपको वो नंबर्स दे सकते हैं।
और अगर कोई बच्चे, टीनेजर्स ये प्रोग्राम देख रहे हैं, सुन रहे हैं, उनको आप क्या कहेंगी?
मैं चाहूँगी कि वो अंडरस्टैंड करें कि प्रॉब्लम्स और कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स तो लाइफ के नेचुरल पार्ट है और हम इससे भाग नहीं सकते। लेकिन जहाँ तक मैं चाहूँगी कि वो रीच आउट करें अपने स्कूल्स में, अपने फ्रेंड्स।
So what you're saying is, if a teenager is watching, please call us or talk to somebody in school. Because when you do talk, you're helping your family. You're not telling on them. You're trying to protect them.
You're helping make a situation better for yourself and your family who needs it as well. So you can always reach out for help, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed about. Reaching out for help is a very, very brave thing to do, in fact, and they will help themselves. It's better than going the other way.
Yes,
right?
And in an agency like yours, we now have people who speak all kinds of languages.
Exactly. Yes.
They can come, and if grandparents are at home and they are not doing well and the children are worried about grandparents, we can send people who speak the language of the grandparents.
There's a lot of resources for seniors. A lot we use a translating agency as well, so there's all languages that we can connect with our clients in, because it's important for them to be comfortable and speak in their language, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you.
To all of us, very little is more precious than our children. Sometimes, as a parent, we don't realize our own actions because we are tired, frustrated, trying to make ends meet, and so on. Life stress do get us. But it is also important that we look at ourselves and ask for help. Before saying anything to anybody, I know from living my own experience as a teenage mom how difficult it was for me to bring up my 3 children, and I didn't know there was help. Thank goodness I am now able to share this information and help those in need, because after all, we are here in Canada working hard to make a better life for ourselves, but also for our children. Until next time, I'm Aruna Papp.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.